Hey everyone, and welcome to Defense One's Spotlight on the Navy. I'm Lauren Williams, Senior Editor, and with me today I have Vice Admiral Kelly Ashback, the head of Naval Information Forces. Admiral, thank you so much for being here.
Lauren, it's a pleasure, and thanks for inviting me to do this again.
There's a lot going on in the world, and I'm interested in your perspective on where information warfare fits in to all of the ongoing conflicts worldwide.
I appreciate that question, and I agree with you, Lauren. It's a dynamic geopolitical environment right now, and very challenging for our Navy. As you know, our Chief of Naval Operations issued her America's Warfighting Plan earlier this year, and in it she articulated our three principles, which is warfighting, warfighters, and the foundation. And when my team took a look at that, it just validated, as we've discussed before, the importance and the criticality of information warfare in the Navy. We are essential in warfighting. We've talked before about how high the demand is for all of the information-related capabilities, and we've seen that reinforced with recent events in the Red Sea, where much of the interactions every day, the success of our sailors who are forward, is dependent on the capabilities we bring in terms of battle space awareness, assured C2, and integrated fires. And then when she talks about war fighters, as you know, we are all about people and teams of people. That is our platform or our best weapon system. And she's just further validated that the approach we take and how we train individuals and deliver them with the most capable equipment is just right on target. And then finally, she talks about the foundation. And I do think what we do from a shore perspective in terms of operational integration, the relationship that we have with allies and partners and our fellow services is in alignment with that as well. And so I just think you see information warfare in keeping with the theme of this event, integrated from a maritime perspective, and that we're really a fabric that runs through all the other warfighting areas.
And here at Sierra Space, we've heard a lot about JADC2, information warfare, electronic warfare, but it's not quite clear to me exactly how many information warfare officers are kind of out on deployed platforms. Can you talk a little bit about that sort of integration and also what your weapon systems would be?
So that's a great question, and I'll use the current Red Sea situation as an example. So when events unfolded, back on 7 October, and we surged naval forces into the region in response and demonstrated our ability to respond and offer American decision makers immediate options. We had about 1,200 information warfighters assembled across 2 carrier strike groups and an amphibious ready group. And that group was led by 3 information warfare commanders. And then they were connected to a shore infrastructure where we already have information warfighting capability present. And so if you can imagine, we have this group afloat who are doing all of the information related support, who can reach back to our fleet weather centers, reach back to our intelligence centers, reach back to our information operations commands where we do signals intelligence and electronic warfare support, also reach back for cyber assistance, and then finally the communications piece, which is all serviced by a global network of communications commands. In totality, we're actually on a daily basis, in my opinion, we probably have upwards of 20,000 information warfare professionals across the Navy who in some way, shape, or form are contributing to what's happening every day. And I do think that makes us unique as a mission set, that because we bring so much capability from the shore side, we're always in the fight, 24/7. We have watch floors that we're running, and we're connected in that way I was talking about fabric to those forces that were forward in the Red Sea. And when they went to actually execute, they can't succeed without that integrated approach. And so we had a phenomenal, I think, probably outsized contribution, in my biased opinion, in terms of what we're bringing to the fight, and the caliber of our individuals and how they responded and have continued to respond every day under pressure has just been tremendous.
Have you seen an increased demand for information warfare specialties and contributions?
We have, and as you know, I'm in my 3rd year in the job, And just in the short time I've been in the position, when I came in, we took on responsibility for cyber forces. We actually have created a cyber designator and a cyber rating, so we now have a family of what we call cyber specialization within the Navy. We had the advent of our space designator, and we already are having folks come back and say they'd like to see more of that, and potentially actually see an enlisted rating in space, which I'm not sure we need, but just demonstrates the interest and the demand for our mission area. And then in the other specialties, cryptology is a great example. That with the advent of directed energy weapons and what we're trying to do from a jamming and deception aspect, that cryptology is on the rise again, and many commands are creating positions and asking for more enlisted sailors and for officers to support them. So I think across the board there is definitely an increased appetite for what we do.
I want to follow up on something you said. You said you're not sure that like an enlisted space rating would be needed. Can you say why? Especially because space is increasingly important across all of the services.
It is. In fact, I think that's demonstrated by the fact that we have a Space Force now, and how critical space is, both to support everything the Navy does, but also the Navy delivers capability that is relevant to what we want to do in space. But I'm not sure yet, just based on the fact that we really haven't gotten enough runtime with the officer corps we've delivered. And I do think space, the space advocacy we need might not need a full family like we have in some of the other information specialties. And so I think it's worth us continuing to watch. But I think we also need to ensure that we work very closely with the Space Force and take that integrated approach to how they service our requirements. And we don't necessarily step out of our lane as a Navy. We lean on them appropriately for what we need from space.
And I want to ask more about ratings. So the new cyber ratings, how is that going? Because that's brand new, less than a year?
It is. In fact, we stood up the officer designator in just under a year, which is actually pretty record pace. We had tremendous interest from across the force, and we chose the initial tranche of officers. So we have almost 150 cyber warriors now in the officer ranks, and we actually built out a pretty good pyramid from ensign up to captain for the initial group. And I think the caliber of those individuals, we put them through a very healthy screening review to ensure we brought over outstanding talent to get them started. Puts us in a very good place. Very well received by our officers, tons of interest by rising folks who are coming in as new accessions and want to be in the cyber field. And then on the enlisted side, I think the feedback from the sailors has been very positive. As you know, the rating used to be part of cryptology, and our rating now really appreciates that there's clarity, that they are doing cyber operations, they are our preeminent sailors in that field. And so we're seeing some improvement in retention. I think really the challenge for us on the sailor side is just how do we continue to bring in the most adept, most agile young people to fill those positions. And we're optimistic we can do that, but I think that's really where the challenge lies.
Is that a recruiting challenge, or is that a training challenge, or a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of both. So on the recruiting side, we actually have embarked on an initiative where we are putting an officer and a master chief now at our recruiting command. And I think you may have heard that CNO talked about the fact that she has upgunned the Navy recruiting command with a 2-star on board now. And I know Admiral Waters well, and so he's really excited that we're making that investment. And then we're going to put 6 chiefs at 6 locations across the country to help us do targeted or focused information warfare recruiting. And we think that presence will really boost the work that our recruiters were already doing, but allow them access to actual information warfare specialists. Separately, on the training side, we have been trying to move training to the left and ensuring that everybody's getting world-class training. And so for our interactive on-net operators, which are really our steepest requirement for our cyber sailors, we now have custody of most of the foundational training, and we introduced a mentoring approach that had us go from, frankly, a very high attrition rate to almost 100% success now in how we're identifying the right sailors, mentoring them, and getting them through the training. And we're using that model or extending that to other work roles in the cyber force. So it's been very positive, and we've seen about a 20% increase in our readiness for the force that we're fielding. And with the trajectory we're on, we're hopeful in the next 2 or 3 years we'll see us entirely close that gap in readiness that we had previously been probably rightly criticized for.
I know one of your priorities has been LVC, Live Virtual Constructive, and getting IW into that. Can you talk a bit about where you are in making sure that that's the standard going forward?
Well, we're very excited because Navy has demonstrated a tremendous commitment to Live Virtual Constructive. And certainly this CNO, as she's talked about war fighters, has renewed a commitment to the training investment. And really that training is probably the one place we can really accelerate between now, or at least in the near term, in how we make a difference in the readiness of our teams. But in this coming year, we're actually going to demonstrate information warfare in Live Virtual Constructive afloat. And then we're hoping to extend that rapidly. We are investing and doing the work on having 3 training facilities, one in Norfolk, one in San Diego, and then one in Yokosuka. And as you know, once we get that up and operating, I'm just so excited about the impact that's going to have. It's going to allow us to real-time measure performance, really focus and tailor training for those who need it most. It will allow us to fully demonstrate capabilities without revealing them, and allow us to be discreet about our tactics and techniques, and then also allow us to maximize in a way that doesn't require approvals, to operate in our coastal waters or in our national airspace. And so I think that combined is really going to unleash innovation and really allow us to lift our game in terms of the caliber of the sailor and the training we're investing in them.
You mentioned the implementation off the coast of Japan. Can you talk a bit about how that will impact, or I guess give the Navy a leg up in terms of securing the Indo-Pacific?
I think it'll be a really tremendous impact. We're going to start with the facility in San Diego, but clearly the objective is to have a facility in Japan where we have forces permanently forward deployed and would allow us to provide persistent training presence. Right now we have to send teams out there to do the training, and as you know, traveling can be difficult at times, especially when we're impacted by budgets and other things, getting folks out there on a regular schedule. And this, I think, will be incredibly impactful and allow us to be really oriented and tailored to the needs of that force forward for Indo-PACOM.
And I understand that most of this is classified, but I'm curious about what your contribution or involvement in Project Overmatch is.
So our role in Project Overmatch is mostly focused on the training piece.
Okay.
And so Admiral Small and the Nav War team have done an exceptional job in accelerating what we're delivering from Project Overmatch, which, as you know, is about the Navy's operational architecture. We are focused on ensuring that we have resilient communications afloat and what we call communications as a service, which allows us to flow data any way we need to. We also, as part of that, are providing what we call battle management aids, which are really designed to accelerate how our folks afloat can make decisions, do planning. And so our role has been, how do we train to ensure we know how to do communications as a service? And then how do we also ensure we have a training construct that really allows rapid employment of these battle management aids and allows strike groups in particular to accelerate in how they're integrating software tools to allow them to make the right decision at the right time.
If I'm remembering correctly, pivoting just a little bit, there was a pilot program with sending IW officers on submarines. Can you talk a bit about that? Any changes there? Any updates?
Yeah, it has been very successful, and we did a review of the first 2 pilots. We were on 2 East Coast submarines, and we had 2 officers and 3 enlisted in each group. And in our evaluation with the submarine force, they have decided to make a permanent investment in the cryptologic technician part of that pilot, which would allow them to have experts on board who can do electronic intelligence, signals intelligence for them. They also were committed to the officer billet and did make a decision based on which skill set was most impactful that we're probably going to go with an information professional, which gives them a communications and cyber defensive expert as part of the submarine crew. And so they are working now on how they identify the resources to underpin permanent billets while we continue to pilot. So we're going to do 2 more efforts on the East Coast. And then on the West Coast, we're going to pilot in a different way. We also had an intel specialist as part of that group. And we got mixed reviews on the impact that had of the individual being underway. And so what we're going to try in the Pacific is putting a team, an information warfare team at the operational center and see if that's more impactful than actually being on board the submarine. And so we're going to continue to pilot a little bit and help inform what the ultimate right configuration is. But it's been, in my opinion, been a resounding success, and we have a really strong partnership with the submarine force in terms of the integration of information warfare.
Just to kind of illustrate that a little bit more, can you talk a bit about the type of problems or scenarios that these IW officers would be solving?
Yeah, and so what I think is happening now, the submarine force, to their credit, has been, they've been self-starters and self-contained for a long time, and they candidly were taking on a lot of our mission set as collateral duty. And the underwater arena has gotten much more complex with competitors operating in the same space and commercial interests. And so our information warriors are now coming and actually delivering and doing those roles that submarine officers were taking on collaterally. So we are the ones now who are coming and focusing on how do they get their communications, how do they do their battle space awareness, and how do we provide them the right information if they have to put weapons on target. And this frees them to focus on the expertise they need to ensure that the submarine is safely operated, that we maintain mastery over competition in how they operate. And so I think it's a really good partnership and just emblematic of the complexity of the environment we're in and how we all have to allow the experts in each respective warfighting area to do their job.
I feel like I have to ask you about this. I have to ask you about drones because we're all talking about the Pentagon's Replicator initiative, and the Navy, I know, is very much so on board with that. Can you talk about where IW fits in with that, and then also the difference between unmanned and uncrewed?
So, information warfare has a huge role to play in unmanned support. And the best example for us right now is we're integrating Triton in the fleet, which is our large unmanned aerial vehicle that can do both geo-intelligence sensing and signals intelligence sensing. And what we're learning, there's no crew on board, it's operated remotely, that the battle space awareness support it needs and the assured communication support it needs, if you want to operate it successfully, keep it on station relative to the targets that you're focused on, get all that data back and process it, requires actually very intense information warfare support. And so I see that as just another way in which my mission area is even in greater demand. And that if we want to be really effective with unmanned and autonomous, we are going to need to invest or continue to invest in really good information warfare support. You almost need more intense support from our mission area to ensure that vehicle operates successfully and that you get it back when you don't actually have someone on board the vessel. And we have an advantage in manned aircraft that there's actually someone there who can literally look out the window and go, oh, the weather's actually worse than what I thought, or it's better than what I thought. They can make judgments on station about how they employ this system. We have to make all those decisions remotely when we're operating an unmanned vehicle. And then in terms of unmanned and uncrewed, so when we talk, I actually think of it more as unmanned versus autonomous. And so unmanned, you actually have to have someone operating the vehicle. And so Triton is one where almost like you have a joystick, and there is an operator, there's a pilot for the vehicle. And so we have many versions of unmanned that require an operator. But we also are exploring the use of autonomous, which essentially that's where you're programming the vehicle, giving it some instruction, and you send it on its way. And you actually don't guide it while it's operating. It is either by waypoints or instructions it has, but it will do its mission, and if its instructions are correct, it will eventually come back to you in most cases. And so there is a distinct difference, but in both, you need to have really good information warfare support to ensure you get the most effective employment of the vehicle.
And so circling back to LVC, how would these systems be incorporated in the training?
So we have actually levied a requirement that as we deliver new systems, they will be compatible with live virtual constructive. And I do see as the Navy increasingly integrates unmanned, that you will see those presented in live virtual constructive, and that we will have scenarios that challenge us to process data, consider threats, provide weather updates, much like we do for platforms in LVs, or manned platforms in live virtual constructive. We would do the same for unmanned in live virtual constructive. And so I think Navy's still looking at that, but I would expect that the way we're building that architecture, the intent would be that we will eventually be able to replicate our force within it and allow our operators to interact and be tested in the ways that they would have to support both manned and unmanned.
So you have a budget. We are about a quarter into the 2024. Can you talk a bit about what we can expect from NAVI-4 for the rest of this year, and then maybe previewing into 2025?
So NAVI-4 for the rest of this year, I think we're excited in the follow through that we're doing with Triton. We've got another orbit that's launching in EUCOM later this year. We expect to have an orbit out in CENTCOM, and that'll continue to inform what we're doing from an unmanned perspective. We have Rim of the Pacific that's happening this summer out in the Pacific that has a whole series of experiments that are ongoing that I think are going to inform the ways that we're trying to employ different systems and some of the technologies that are being developed. We are excited about where the Chief of Naval Operations is headed. I think we're expecting she's going to update the naval plan and provide some details on her targets and goals that I think are going to land squarely in our lane. I think are really going to focus on things like our maritime operations centers, which are central to the operational level of war, and where we have the primary responsibility for manning, training, and equipping. And so I think a lot to look forward to this year. And then as we roll into 25, I think we're really going to see the maturation of our cyber family of designators, and also see the fruition of some of the growth we actually got last year for our Naval Information Warfighting Development Center. And so in the last budget, we did get a plus up of over 200 personnel, and I think we'll start to see the benefits of those personnel arriving and how that's going to expand our capacity to do all kinds of training and doctrine development within information warfare.
Can you give us a preview of how you're going to bring in those extra 200 bodies to?
So some of them, because they're military, we actually have to, yes, assess and prioritize the force we currently have. And we have come up with a scheme by which we are prioritizing fills with existing leadership as we grow new capacity. So it will allow us to recruit and assess more officers and sailors going forward. Not a lot, but the numbers we'll have to start at the bottom and work our way up. But on the civilian side, we've actually gotten approval for early hiring against some of those positions, and so I'm optimistic that some of the talent will start showing up in October, November timeframe to start supporting us.
And just to close out, we're here on the show floor at Sierra Space. Anything catch your eye?
Well, I will say what has caught my eye is, and the Chief of Naval Operations talks about this, but I am just so overwhelmed by the outstanding support we get by industry in general. I had not had the chance to attend a Sierra in Space before, and this showing, it just makes me really feel good about being an American. I mean, I think about the challenges we have, but this commitment by industry to support the Department of Defense and our Navy in particular, and all the innovation that's going on. I mean, there's just so many bright ideas that I feel very positive about our ability to take on really immense challenges, that we will succeed. It may take us a little time to work our way through it. We tend to be a little messy sometimes about how we do that, but that this is really validating in terms of who we are and what we do. And then the fact that you see all the allies here is just phenomenal. So really, I just think a real boost for me in terms of how I get to spend the week.
Admiral, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Lauren. It's been such a pleasure to be here with you.
And thank you for joining us. I'm Lauren Williams, Defense One.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm Anna Pettyjohn, Executive Vice President of Product and Strategy with GovExec, and I'm excited to continue our conversation alongside today's underwriter, Mantech. Joining me from Mantech is Julie Vita, Vice President of Defense Growth at Mantech. Julie, it's great to have you here. Let's jump right in.
Sounds good.
First, Navy leadership consistently points to people issues, such as recruiting, retention, training, as top priorities to maintain the health of the force. How is Mantech delivering capabilities to support these critical initiatives?
Right. And that's a challenge of all the military services, quite frankly. But specifically to the Navy, what Mantech is doing now is we're already supporting their NCTE environment, so Navy constructive training environment. But what Mantech is starting to do differently is help to tie the Navy's training environments with the Marine Corps training environments, and then eventually, the rest of the DoD in the pursuit of a true JADC2 environment. But the infrastructure, the architecture, and all of that engineering work that needs to happen so that the data can flow seamlessly and securely between all the disparate systems that exist today is hard enough within one military service, but now bringing it in, combining the Navy with the Marine Corps is another level challenge. And we're proud to be doing that through a project called Project Tripoli, of all things. So for example, in that training environment, you could have an F-35 that's talking with Marine Corps ground vehicles who are then communicating with a forward air controller, and all of those things that happen in the battle space, but are happening in a live virtual constructive training environment. Again, combining two different sets of disparate training ranges and capabilities at the data layer. So that's one thing. Another thing is on the retention or the recruiting and retention piece, and that is Mantech, just like everyone else and the Navy, we're all in the war for talent. We're all looking for the right talent. For the military services, we all know this has been a huge challenge recently. And one thing that I'd like to tee up that we would love to deliver for the Navy is starting to have conversations, but understanding the challenges, is to provide an environment, a work environment for especially younger sailors coming into the military that they're used to at home and at school. And that's Google. That's Google Workspace. So Mantech is the only federal systems integrator right now that's incorporated Mantech for our enterprise use. And we're starting to talk to DoD leaders about using it to attract and retain that younger workforce that want the same tech that they're used to. It's at the beginning stages, but that could really be a game changer, particularly for those who are looking for a different option than the same environment, let's say, that the DoD has pretty much been beholden to for the past couple decades. So those two things alone, I think, are really game changers for the Navy, and Mantech's really proud to be at the center of both of them.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And speaking of specifically the Indo-Pacific theater, so it continues to present increasing geopolitical and military challenges to our Navy and allied partners. The tyranny of distance alone is a formidable hurdle as the threat landscape expands. What can Mantech bring to this fight as it rapidly evolves and changes shape?
Right. There's a bunch of things that Mantech is doing, especially as the Indo-PACOM theater gets more and more challenged and contested. But I'll touch on just three. I'll touch on a few. The mission partner environment. So right now, that is generally thought of, there's bilateral networks, like one country can talk to one country, and there's specific security that enables that. But what's really needed, the demand signal, is for many nations in that area to be able to share information and data. And right now, there aren't great ways for us to be able to do that kind of information sharing. So again, back to the building the infrastructure and the architecture to allow for information exchange at the data layer, Mantech is doing in that, investing in the engineering that's required, and the security implementations, the zero trust implementations. And that's really exciting because that theater, it's such a hotbed and things are moving so quickly. And without appropriate and secure communications between all the mission partners, it's going to be an even bigger challenge. So that's one. The second one is in the area of contested logistics. And again, this is another one that's a concern of all the military services, but the Navy, of course, has this particular challenge of operating across the world's oceans and waterways where there's not the same kind of connectivity, and the distances alone are just super challenging. So right now we're working through concepts and solutions on enabling data again and information flow to support the modern operating environment that is the Indo-Pacific theater, in order to not only leverage the theater for our own logistics, but to be able to counter our adversaries who are doing the same thing and are starting to try different ways of beating us at our own game out there in Indo-Pac. So contested logistics is the second one. And then a third one is really unique to Mantech. We have a group out, they operate out of the San Diego area, and they do environmental support. So think hydrographic surveys, geologic surveys, oceanic analysis. All of that is incredibly important. It's not something we normally think of when we think of the battle space of the Indo-PACOM theater, but think of all the the traffic that's going on surface and subsurface, and the changing environment on the ocean floor, and all the marine characteristics that are changing. We have an organization that's out there with expertise in ocean engineering and marine biology and things like that to make sure that the U.S. Navy has the up-to-date, most recent surveys and geological information so that they can further define where the force is going to move and operate.
That's great. You hit on a few themes that I just want to reiterate is just investing in infrastructure and really enabling that data and information sharing across the board,
Yes.
especially with those three examples that you shared.
Yes.
So last question for you today. The Navy has unique challenges regarding operations at the tactical edge. With globally dispersed ships, submarines, aircraft, and other units, that tactical edge is dynamic and always on the move. What technology innovations are available to support the Navy in this unique and critical mission challenge?
Well, fortunately, there are quite a few, and there's some innovative tech that we've been hearing about for the past few years, but Mantech's right there in the middle of them too. 3D printing is one of them. Developing capability literally at the edge, on the ship, at undersea, wherever it needs to be. Now, of course, there are security and compliance challenges that pop up, but having that capability on the edge for commanders to really create something out of just what they have available to them is a game changer. Getting through all the requirements and making that safe and secure is another challenge, but all of industry is working on that. But one unique capability that we have, we're calling it Capstan, and it's cyber physical simulation twinning environment. It's digital twinning. But for the Navy, particularly at this tactical edge that we've talked about, it's a game changer in terms of, again, achieving that JADC2 vision, where you've got a centralized mission command, so the Pentagon or some other headquarters, but you've got distributed command and control. You have units that are operating independently as they have to, and decentralized execution. So you can't just call back to the flagpole, and get answers and get decisions on when you're going to execute your mission. So having a digital twinning environment allows for the simulation of tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs, and other kinds of on-the-spot decision-making and capability development. And that's really exciting to see that it's not just one of those things where, just the IT folks are doing that in the lab, and we're going to create some hardware that, eventually will be delivered out to the fleet. It absolutely is enabling in-time, in-theater decision-making and command and control for the Navy's distributed units, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, lots of opportunity there. Well,
Yes.
That's unfortunately all the time we have, but Julie, thank you so much for being here with me today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And I also want to give a special thanks to Mantech, who made today's conversation possible. And lastly, thank you to our audience for tuning in. Keep an eye on your inbox for a link to the on-demand program for today, and feel free to share it with your colleagues who might not have been able to attend the live program. I'm Anna Pettigen, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.